What's up, everyone? This is Trips Exposing the Matrix, and I'm Trip. Usually this channel is about the occult and conspiracy, but today I'm going to be taking off my tinfoil hat and doing something a little bit different. Today is going to be a season finale review for the season finale of House of the Dragon Season 2. Let me first start off by saying that I was pretty disappointed by the season finale. I, like a lot of other people, thought this season had a lot of build-up that didn't really go anywhere. But what I really want to talk about today is how House of the Dragon is so different from the original Game of Thrones series. And I want to ask, did it really have to be this way? House of the Dragon is set in Westeros, the same timeline, the same universe as the original Game of Thrones series. But the original Game of Thrones felt more like an action-packed fantasy, and House of the Dragon feels more like a historical drama. For lack of a better word, it feels like they completely ripped the balls off the original Game of Thrones series. What got me so interested in the original Game of Thrones was the friendship between Ned Stark and the King in season 1. I could really relate to the dynamic between two best friends who grew up together being rowdy and getting into trouble, but now as adults, they have to settle down into their duties, sometimes reminiscing about how fun and crazy things used to be, which also added a lot of humor to the show. I'm a big fan of the movie A Knight's Tale, so those earlier episodes depicting jousting and some familiar faces were really badass to me. And even after those characters died, we still got to see some amazing, unlikely friendships, like the friendship between Jon Snow and Samwell Tarly, or the friendship between Arya and the Hound. While that may not necessarily be a friendship, they certainly looked out for each other. But every male character in this new House of the Dragon series is a stereotypical, power-hungry man with no redeemable qualities at all. And I really feel like one of the reasons the original Game of Thrones series had so much success was because there was a little bit of something for everybody. I'm kind of like an edgelord male, and there was stuff for me. There was stuff for the girl bosses. There was a little bit of girl on girl. There was a little bit of guy on guy, and nobody batted an eye. And when I met somebody in public who was also a Game of Thrones fan, I just assumed they were a fairly open-minded person. But this new House of Dragon series just seems like a boring, opaque version of the original. And where the original Game of Thrones series is a series that can be enjoyed by men, women, and was inclusive, this new series seems to not be targeted towards men at all. The girl bossing is extremely weak, and the inclusive stuff seems very cringy and forced. It's fairly obvious to me that this new series is trying to capture a new audience, and in doing so, they've essentially completely lost their original fan base. And the real irony to me is that I have a friend and coworker who just happens to be lesbian, who was a Game of Thrones fan, and she told me that she stopped watching House of Dragon after the first episode, because she just couldn't get into it. It's not the original Game of Thrones. The fact that this happens so often is actually why I'm not excited at all for the new Joker movie. The original Joker movie was a great movie, and it highlighted the struggles of men. But how is it perceived by the media? It was labeled an incel movie, and they told people not to go to the movie theaters in fear of being shot. And even though the original Joker movie was a great movie, look what they're doing with the sequel. They're injecting a gay icon.
Put a chick in it, make her gay! Put another gay diverse woman in it, make it more fucking lame!
And they're making it into a musical.
Look how they massacred my boy.
The first episode of the season was debatably the best episode of the whole season, and even that episode was fairly boring, with the real excitement coming in at minute 54 of a 64-minute episode. The kiss between Rhaenyra and the White Worm was understandably unscripted because it made no sense in the story, and what made it worse was that Mysaria had just explained how she had been assaulted and impregnated by her father, and for some reason Rhaenyra thought this was a good time to kiss her. And the season finale was such a letdown. By that time, we were all so starved for action that a mud fight was okay at the time, but after the season wrapped up with no battles, no dragon fight, no conflict between Rhaenyra and Alicent, no conflict between Rhaenyra and Daemon, the mud fight just seemed like insult to injury, and the humor attempted during that scene was just cringe. We were literally so much so anticipating some action, and everybody just made up. In conclusion, this season reminds me of a lesson I truly grasped years ago, which is that in trying to please everyone, you often lose yourself. And this is exactly what House of the Dragon seems to me. Lost. It's like one of those movies that ends and you think, I really have a feeling that the director didn't know how to end this movie themselves. This story in Westeros seems to be a shell of the original version, or a puppet, if you will, willing to take on any agenda that it thinks will grow its fan base, like a politician. All this attempt at inclusivity and being inclusive is actually having an opposite effect. I felt like growing up there was, like I said, something for everyone. There were movies for men. There were chick flicks. There were inclusive movies. And whenever Blade came out, nobody enjoyed Blade because, oh my gosh, this movie's so brave. We needed a black Marvel character. People liked Blade because it was badass. And what's really scary to me is I can't imagine any of my favorite movies or TV shows being made today. And that's sad to me. There used to be movies that were made for women, but that could be enjoyed by men, and vice versa. Movies that were made for men, but can be enjoyed by women. But nowadays, the majority entertainment is made for white liberal women. And there's a great deal of gaslighting going on in the entertainment industry. Time and time again, they will take something that is historically loved by men, and then they will twist it into something it was not. And then when there's backlash, they're like, oh, well, we weren't trying to offend you. And it's like, what did you expect? Turning the Force into the thread. And I'm not even a Star Wars fan. I just have empathy for people that like Star Wars. And please don't think that this video is anti-women. This video is pro-women. Y'all didn't deserve this either. Nobody deserved this. The only way I think I can hit this nail on the head any better than I already have is by reiterating that this is not an anti-women or an anti-gay thing. This is a bad, boring show thing. And when a show turns out this boring, and I can't help but notice how much the writers have injected their own politics, I can't help but think they should have spent less time injecting their politics in the show and more time writing a good story.